Books. We're back to talk about books. Where have we been? I hear you asking, all 7 viewers. Is anybody still actually out there? Are we still here? Who knows? Well, it's been a while since I've had to intro a video, so I'm rambling. I don't know what to say. How have you been?
I've been good. I have not been reading all that much.
Where have we been?
Mentally or physically?
Both, actually.
Yeah, there's been some holidays, geographically speaking, in terms of where we've been. But mentally, we've had a lot of energy going one specific way because we are currently hoping to change our background in the near future.
We are in the process of trying to secure property. We've been trying to buy a house. We are in the process of that as we speak. But that has taken a significant amount of our attention span and effort and free time when we're not working. And also, I was in Spain for the vast majority of July, the first half of July. Anyway.
We were doing shit. Yeah, that's where we were.
But also, in terms of books, we have kept reading, and that's what this video is. Usually we, just talk about the books that we've read. That's the purpose of these videos. You guys know that. It's been a while. Shut up. So we'll talk about the books that we have read in the last couple of months since we have last filmed. God, it's been a long time. I feel really bad at this. Not that I was ever very good at it anyway.
In a way, it's been kind of nice. It's reset my reading a little bit, I think, in terms of just picking up whatever without really thinking much about it. So in a way, it's encouraged my mood reading, but for a while I was also not slumping because it wasn't like I was struggling to read. I was just not finding that much time to read because we've been busy.
Yeah, but also I've noticed over the last few months, I think with the channel and being involved in all the online spaces, that even though we don't necessarily follow the trend or the crowd or whatever, it does impact sort of the way you read and how you think about it. And I think subconsciously I was starting to put pressure on myself too. However, we nipped it in the bud. I have some excellent books to talk about.
Nice.
And some really, really great reads that I've just enjoyed and took my time with. Usually I take my time with books anyway. I'm not the fastest reader in the world, although I have the ability to read a lot. But I'm usually reading multiple things at once, and usually that works for me. But lately, with everything that's been going on, one book at a time has been working for me, and it's been very nice. It's I've sinking in a little more and sort of being engrossed in one thing a lot more. So I have several books that have done that for me now over the last 2 months that we can talk about, and we should actually get into the books now.
Let's do it.
Taking you all the way back to the start of June is a book I honestly barely remember at this point. A lot has been happening. I read Barehead by Adrian Tchaikovsky with a couple of mates, Matt from Matt on Books and Evie from She Was Only Evie, and all of the discords in this little sphere corner of BookTube. I really love Adrian Tchaikovsky, one of my favourite modern science fiction authors. I've never read any of his fantasy, to be remedied at one point. And Dogs of War is one of my favourite modern science fiction books, so I was excited to get to Barehead. I just don't know if it was the right time for me to read this book, but it's still good. However, there is a very, very distinct political figure being commented on in this book that is causing the entire world a lot of headache right now and ass pain, to be perfectly honest. And this orange person is very much the villain in this book. Quite overtly so. Not the same name, but that's who it is. And he's done, Tchaikovsky did it very, very well here, setting it in the world of Dogs of War. And Honey is a character here who is the bear from the first book, and she is essentially uploaded as an AI companion into the brain of somebody who's working on Mars, an augmented human working on Mars. And back home on Earth, the antagonist is the man himself. While this book was very good, I just don't think I was in the mood for it.
A bit too real in that sense.
Yeah, and just I was a bit, fatigued.
Mm-hmm.
So I sort of struggled a little bit. And also, like, when I was reading it, and at the time, I had nothing but positives to say about it. I still thought Dogs of War I just enjoyed more. I like the voice in it more. This one has a strong voice as well. I like the character of Jimmy Martin. And I like Honey the Bear. But yeah, I just felt a little fatigued, and just given the way things are in the world right now, a little not exactly what I want to be reading when it is ever present. So yeah, Adrian Tchaikovsky is good. He's still a great writer. This is still a good book. I don't really have anything negative to say about it. It's maybe lacking a little of the spark and the oomph for me that Dogs of War had, but that's fine. I like that it wasn't exactly the same book as Dogs of War. But yeah, just not necessarily the right time for me to read it. I think I maybe would have enjoyed it more maybe a couple of years ago, or maybe in a couple of years' time when, maybe in 4 years' time.
Darkness Take My Hand by Dennis Lehane. This is, I think, the 5th Dennis Lehane I read this year. It's his second ever published novel, and the second in his Kenzie and Gennaro series. So that's his, like, a little bit more straightforward crime mystery detective series. Angela Gennaro and Patrick Kenzie are the main characters. This one I loved. I mean, I'm at a point, I think we all know, that it'll be a shocker if I don't love something that Dennis Lehane has written. I do think that you can tell in this one that it's only his second book, and that he's going for a bit more depth thematically than he did in his very first one, A Drink Before the War. So that's his first book. I read that recently as well and loved it. And I think there it was less evident because he didn't go for as much. Here he's going for more. And it's not like he falls short fully, really, but I can just tell that Dennis Lehane 10 years later would have done it very seamlessly. And here I could see the writing a little, I could see the intention a little, if that makes sense. So kind of a nitpick, to be honest. Like, it's still a great book, and I'm going to enjoy all of these. So there's 6 or 7, I can't remember, and I plan to continue sooner rather than later. Don't have all that much more to say about this one. I enjoy this, like, classic detective series. I haven't read one of those in a while, where, like, you can read them in order and you'll see how the relationships between the main characters evolve, but then each book itself is kind of episodic and its own little story, that, like, the way a lot of crime series work. And I haven't read one or found a new one in a while, so that's nice. It's nice that I like Dennis Lehane doing that as well. And I would definitely recommend this to anybody who likes crime.
I intended to make a review for this, maybe I still will. But this might be one of the best post-apocalyptic books that you've never read. This is Mockingbird by Walter Tevis, which is about a highly developed robot man called Spufforth, who has kind of lost the will to live because he is programmed to not die. And he can't take his own life. And this is resulting in the deepest depression, but he's a robot. And it's kind of this sort of melancholic character journey for him, But also there is a man by the name of Paul Bentley who discovers something called books and reading. And oh my god, what's going on here? This is set way, way in the future, where literacy has been completely wiped out. Everybody who remains is in this kind of trance of distraction and entertainment. People set themselves on fire to just feel something. Very dark book, but it's written in a sort of a kind of pleasant, melancholic way. And then Paul Bentley also discovers love. He meets this mysterious, enigmatic woman in a zoo, and they form a bond quite similar to the one in 1984 between the two main characters there. Can't remember their names now. Mockingbird is really beautifully written, and it's also exceptionally prescient now in terms of AI, in terms of numbing our brains with entertainment feeds, with people's disappearing empathy. Empathy is seen as a social taboo in this book. You're not allowed to show emotion, and you're not allowed to express emotion for another person. People look at you strange in this world. And these two characters and this robot, Spufforth. So Spufforth, to exercise, walks up the stairs of the Empire State Building every day and goes to the top of it and imagines himself falling from it. It's a dark book, but it is very incisive and insightful about what it's trying to say without beating you over the head with it. Because this is a book from like 1981, and I think it would still have applied then, and it applies even more now. So it's different to 1984 in a way, because it's slightly modernized with this sort of idea of numbing our brains with entertainment and that kind of thing. And it hits home now, but in a slightly subtle way. The characters here are engaging, and they win you over. You go back and forth on the main robot, on Spufforth, a little bit. You're not quite sure of him or his intentions or his motives, and you kind of question whether, is he evil, and what does he want to accomplish aside from just taking his own life. And there's an interesting examination of him as well, of his selfishness, but not in terms of him wanting to take his own life, but there's a very interesting question to be had about him as a character, which maybe I'll go into if I make a video about this book. But I think this is really up there with some of the other post-apocalyptic books, and it should probably be talked about more, and perhaps more people will discover it. There's a masterwork edition of it, and just where we are in terms of, empathy in the world, and people being addicted to their phones and losing the ability to distinguish reality from an entertainment feed, and what that does to your brain and how you respond to other human beings in reality. Very interesting, and this book got me thinking about all of that. And I guess in a certain way, I could have had the same criticism that I did for Barehead, which this is all just far too topical right now, and I don't know if I'm in the mood. But perhaps my interest lies more right now in commenting on that side of things rather than the state of one nefarious politician who we just know is not a nice man. There's no question there. So that's Mockingbird by Walter Tevis. A really, really good book. Definite contender for the top 10 of the year.
Is it maybe that it's like timely in a more subtle way because he didn't literally write it about our times, whereas
Yes.
Tchaikovsky is literally writing about our times?
Yes.
Yeah.
You could criticize Tchaikovsky for being too heavy-handed with Barehead, I think. And people do it like, being overly didactic with their political agenda or whatever. Usually I understand this as a criticism, but quite often that criticism comes from somebody just not agreeing with the political side of things. I agree with Tchaikovsky. I do think he was a little heavy-handed in that book. Walter Tevis in Mockingbird was a little more subtle, and it was a little more pensive, got attached to the characters. There was a turn in the halfway through the book that kind of was less interested in, but yeah, by the end it said what it had to say, and I liked it. So anyway, I might make a separate video for people to find.
While staying on the topic of timely and whether things can be too close to home, the next thing I read was Prophet Song by Paul Lynch. This was a buddy read with our friend Jimmy from the Fantasy Network. We had been meaning to read this book for like 2 years. So Prophet Song came out in 2023, around the time I was starting to work in the bookshop. We launched that book when it came out, and the author Paul Lynch came in to read from it and sign copies. Our copy is signed. That was actually the first time I worked an event, so I have a personal connection to that book. And I chatted to Paul Lynch, and he mentioned that the first print run of the hardcover only was 1,000 copies, but that he had been getting hints from the publisher that it might do the rounds in terms of literary circles, and that first edition hardcover might end up being worth something. So I bought one, and it was a good tip because he ended up winning the Man Booker Prize, or I think it's now just the Booker Prize, in 2023.
The Man Booker Prize for a long time.
Has it? Well, he won the Booker in 2023, formerly the Man Booker. Anyway, so this book is a dystopia in a way, but a very near future kind of dystopia. So we're not in sci-fi territory really of different technology or space exploration or post-apocalyptic or anything like that. It is concerned with the slide into fascism. The two, I'd say, things that make it stand out from other books or media stories in general about a society sliding into fascism are, one, that it is focused specifically on the effects that it has on one family. So we're constantly just in one character's head, who is the mother of the family. They have a couple of kids, I think 3 kids, and a husband. And the mother is our main character. We're following her thoughts very closely, constantly. So we only know what she knows, and it's just looking at what this societal shift is doing to her and to her family. The other thing is that it's set in Ireland, and usually stories like that are about the US, and movies like that are about the US, and one of the things that you end up wondering about is, where the fuck is the rest of the world? Hi, we exist. Well, this one is about Ireland, and specifically it's set in Dublin. So it's a very, very good book. It was too close to home, literally, because it's happening in Dublin, and that was anxiety inducing. But at the same time, I think with where we're at in the world, I probably would have had a better experience reading it if I had read it when it came out than reading it now, because we're already closer to what he is describing in the book. Not in Ireland currently, but in general, certainly in the US. So when you're reading about things in the news on a daily basis and talking about it with people on a daily basis, and then reading about it in fiction, it just didn't really feel like reading fiction. So in a way, I think I wasn't the target audience for this book. I agree kind of with you, like you were saying about Tchaikovsky. I agree with Paul Lynch, but I didn't need to hear most of what he put into this book. However, I did still get something out of it. This is a difficult book to pitch because he does not really like paragraphs all that much, and he certainly doesn't like quotation marks. So this is one of those books that doesn't have quotation marks for dialogue, but he also doesn't break it out into paragraphs. So it's all within one paragraph, which makes it a little bit inaccessible. Like, I think the first paragraph break of the book is on page 4, but it does serve a purpose. I'm usually not into this at all, and it did make it a little bit challenging to read, but it creates this feeling of anxiety and of anxious energy because you're going, from thoughts to dialogue to description to thoughts to dialogue. Like, it's all just a constant continuation without breaks. It feels breathless because that's how the character feels, with like life as she knows it unraveling, and like she feels powerless and you feel powerless reading because it's just continuing and continuing and continuing without relief. So I think the writing style really works for what he's saying. I think it could have come across very pretentious. It still does a little, I think. Like, I'm not sure if it was entirely necessary, or if it was necessary for the entire book or to that extent. But it does really create an atmosphere to the reading experience that sets it apart, again, from other stories about this and make it very unique. And looking back now, it's been about 6 weeks, I'd say, since I finished it. And the main thing that comes back to me when I think about the book is how I felt reading it. And usually I think that's a really positive sign in terms of a book staying in my memory and it really doing something to me. And it certainly did something to me. But reading it at a time where the world is quite dark, and then reading fiction that is not just also dark, but dark in the same way, was a bit much. This might be potentially the most depressing book I have ever read. And I have read a lot of depressing books. I read a lot of depressing books that I loved last year, but reading this book, particularly in the current political climate of the world, was very heavy. So I'm not sure who I would recommend it to in terms of you should read this. But if what I'm saying sounds interesting, I think you will get something out of the book. I think the book is honestly, in my opinion, kind of brilliant. It might be a bit of a masterpiece. I think particularly the first 2 chapters and the last 2 chapters are incredible. In the middle, it probably could have been a little bit shorter. I think he was maybe making a point about this mundane repetitiveness. Almost, you notice when you start, where it starts happening, but then once it has started, it's just giving a little bit step by step and you don't realize, and then suddenly there's a shift and it's like completely gone. Maybe he was trying to comment on that, but it did make the middle of the book drag a little bit. But the beginning and the end, I think, are brilliant. Maybe could have been like 50 pages shorter. Just really fucking depressing and dark, and it doesn't really give you anything to hold on to either. Like, it just, there's no hope. It's just...
My Star Wars adventure doth continue. Book 2 of the Hand of Thrawn duology. Vision of the Future was the other thing that I read. Finished this on audio, I think. So Spectre of the Past was the first book in the Thrawn duology. Overall, the 4th Thrawn book that Timothy Zahn wrote back in the OG era of real Star Wars. The old expanded universe. And I think Spectre of the Past was my favourite of the Timothy Zahn Thrawn books. And this one, not my favourite, wrapped it up satisfyingly. However, this book is about 300 pages too long. There are too many scattered subplots that I couldn't give a shit about. Luke and Mara Jade finally got married. It's been too many books now, and all of the books in between that I didn't even read, my god, they dragged it out. Will they, won't they, will they, won't they? Oh my god, do it. We resolved the issue of the remnants of the Empire, and I'm excited now. This is the last book I have in my little sort of headcanon of getting into New Jedi Order. So book 1 of the New Jedi Order will be next. I have been doing these mostly on audio and then reading a little bit, but quite a bit on audio. I did read a good chunk of this as well with my eyeballs. But yeah, this one was a little too long, a little too convoluted. I think it stretched out what was a really interesting premise and a really sort of mature look at the political landscape and interesting, complex political aftermath of the OG movies. That storyline is done very well. All the other side plots, subplots just felt like giving characters things to do. But yeah, ultimately this is still good. I think Spectre of the Past is really in the upper echelons of Star Wars books that I've read, just for the whole political plot of that book. Really interesting. That gets resolved here. And yeah, we continue on.
Well, after reading Prophet Song, and also like in general, I think in the first half of the year, I was in the mood for reading a lot of like non-fiction and angry books about the state of the world and like literary fiction and that kind of thing. And I think Prophet Song made me hit a wall a little bit and say, okay, I need to have a little bit of fun and escape. Total escapism also doesn't work, because I tried the new Emily Henry release, A Great Big Beautiful Life, and that was just jarring because it's meant to be set in 2025, but then everything is lovely and wonderful and easy, and that just didn't make sense to me either. So what could we do? What could be fun and escapist and yet also be a little bit like challenging, like not challenging as in difficult to read, but like have things going on and like characters and, you know, that you root for and love? Well, I remembered a series that I started last year and read the first 2 books and really enjoyed them, especially the first one, which is like a prequel. You might guess where I'm going, of novellas. And then I read the first one and I was like, oh, this is fine, but everybody said it's the weakest one. I picked up Crown of Midnight by Sarah J. Maas, which is the second novel in the Throne of Glass series. It had been about a year since I read Throne of Glass and the novellas Assassin's Blade. So it was time. It was time to pick up the next one, and I had been told that these books get better as you go along, and they do. I thought this was a huge step up from Throne of Glass. It's really fun. We start going in really interesting directions. There's some bits that are a bit horror-esque that I wasn't expecting, like, you know, things going on under the castle at night in the dark and monsters and things like that. And some of those passages were genuinely creepy. But the most important thing, and I think what I was really craving, is that this book really hooked me. It was addictive. I wanted to get home from work to continue reading. I took it to work to read on the bus. It's not a very long bus journey, so I usually don't read on the bus, but I was reading physically while walking to the bus stop. I missed that feeling, because this is not a book that like is a masterpiece or like it's like literary or impressively written or anything like that, but it's so fun, so engaging, and like I said, it is really a step up from Throne of Glass. And I started to see, oh, we might start to open up the world perhaps after this, and it had some emotional weight behind it as well. Very, very fun book. I had a great time.
So I think over the last few months, not all the time, but I have been feeling a kind of a struggle to get through some books, and then when I get towards the end, I sort of race through them a little. And I don't typically read that way. However, I just wanted to make a sort of conscious effort to slow down and sink into things. I kind of dropped everything and I went to pick up a book just that I had been eyeing up for a little while. And we happened to watch Training Day with Denzel Washington and Ethan Hawke. One of my favorite movies about a crazy cop. And I was like, oh, cool. I want to read a book like this and just blast through it. And it just so happens that your favorite writer has exactly a book like that. So I really wanted to read it because he wrote my favorite book of last year, and he might have written my favorite book of this year. And that is The Force by Don Winslow, his cop novel. This is about a dirty cop called Sergeant Denny Malone in New York City, in Washington Heights, I believe, in North Manhattan. And he is the head of a special task force, detail, whatever, called The Force, which is fun. But these boys are dirty cops. These boys shave a little off the top. They're not afraid to get their hands a little bit dirty, but they live by a code. There's rules to the dirtiness. Don Winslow is so fucking good at writing unbelievably gripping plots with ridiculously interesting, complex characters and a supporting cast that play off each other and fight for each other and then betray each other, and then there's just emotional turmoil in every chapter, and it's not cheap thrills. This is a weighty book, and it's also a love letter to New York City, which I have since learned is where Don Winslow was born. And this is a love letter to Staten Island, and North Manhattan. Is it Northeast Manhattan? I can't remember. Northwest Manhattan. Anyway, I thought that Don Winslow was from San Diego because a lot of his stuff is set in San Diego and it's about surfing. He puts a lot of that into his books. We'll get to that again in a minute. But yeah, I didn't know he was actually originally born in New York, from New York.
He has a good few books about New York as well.
Right.
Yeah, I can explore. I think there's one that you might really like that's like set in the 50s.
Yeah. Cool. But this one was very post 9/11, and it was a love letter to New York and to first responders and people working in the NYPD and the FDNY, and all of the lengths that these people go to protect their city, to keep people safe, the jobs that they do, the work that they do. And in the immediate aftermath, or the years after 9/11, these individuals that feel like they maybe missed out on being a hero, and how do they fill that void? Do they create problems for themselves to solve, to be a hero? Do they see themselves as more than they are? And Don Winslow kind of really layers that underneath these characters in this book. Like Denny Malone, for all the sort of bad shit that he does, you kind of get into his way of thinking and his code and his honor that he lives by. And this sort of misguided brotherhood that he feels he is a part of, this idea of it. You kind of empathize with it. You sympathize with him. You're kind of on his side, even though he's dirty as fuck. That's a skill that Don Winslow has. That he's not just writing an anti-hero or he's morally grey. Please stop with the morally grey. He's just a human being, you know? He's a human. Well, person. Don Winslow is really, really, really skilled at putting you in those shoes, where that is where you are able to sink into another person's perspective. And it's not necessary that you like that person, but you can get into that perspective and understand it and then go along with it and then feel like you are that as you're reading the story. So it makes you emotional and it pulls you along. That doesn't mean that you like this character or whatever, but you understand this character and you feel for him. He's very, very skilled at that. And this book is full of thematic depth, and you can make metaphors all you want about 9/11 and about just New York as a city, New York City as a concept. The place is a country, you know? It's got the population of a lot of countries.
Yeah.
And it's got a microculture of its own within America. And this, I think, is another Don Winslow great American novel. But it's actually not. It's the great New York City book. It's his book about New York City. And it makes sense that he would do that, focusing on the NYPD. There's a lot of movies and stuff made about this, and it reminded me a lot of really good movies that I liked when I was a teenager, and like really sort of exploring these movies for the first time with my old man.
Oh, it kicked off watching crime classics spree for us, which was really fun.
Yeah, because you'd never seen stuff like The French Connection or Serpico. Serpico, one of my favorites.
Serpico's great.
And a lot of references to Serpico in this book, a lot of references to the French Connection, these kinds of things. Dog Day Afternoon. So if you like those kinds of movies as well, if you're into that, all of that is kind of in here, and he pays homage to that as well. And the character kind of weirdly, in this weird sort of masculine and macho idea, sees himself as one of these characters in one of these movies, but Don Winslow is writing him as one of these characters in this book. It's a cool little dynamic that's going on, and it's just, yeah, layered with a love for the genre, a love for this kind of storytelling, but it's ridiculously gripping. I think it's the best book I've read this year.
Nice.
So, yeah.
I'm overjoyed.
The Force by Don Winslow. He swoops in and he wins 2025 as well. There you go. So I enjoyed that so much that I read another one that I'd had on the waiting list for a while, and that is The Winter of Frankie Machine by Don Winslow. This is also outstanding. It's funny that the first ever Don Winslow book that I read that she gave me many years ago now is by far my least favorite.
Yeah, I picked the wrong one to start for you.
So anyway, I read The Winter of Frankie Machine. I went off to Spain. I visited my grandmother, my abuelita, and I spent 3 weeks over there. Didn't read a huge amount, but whenever I sort of went off and went down to the beach, I brought The Winter of Frankie Machine, so I was reading it in summer on the beach. This is about Frank Macchiano, the Machine, a legend in the mob underworld. He used to be a hitman, and now he's a retired guy who works on the San Diego pier as the bait guy for all the fishermen. But he can get stuff done on the side, you know what I mean? And this is just a fun mob thriller. The star here is the character. The main character is a wonderful main character with a really great voice, with particular quirks that just make it slightly unusual for a mob book. He has his kind of rules, and sort of he's very well-mannered, and things must be respectable in the way they are, and he's obviously a violent person, but he doesn't necessarily like that he's a violent person. He just realized when he was young that he was very good at it, and people paid him to do it. But he has no warm feelings towards the mob. But inevitably, as in all these stories, the mob come knocking on his door again, and he gets thrust back into problems and trouble. And yeah, so it's essentially following this one character very, very closely, but there is a little bit of POV jumping, whereas the Force is very tight on that one cop. It's like you're in that cop's head, that's the story. This does jump around a little bit, but the main character here has that really distinct kind of identity, personality. I think I personally preferred the Force just because there was more layers and richness, and sort of there was a grander scope to it all. But this, as a sort of character book and a fun book, it's also excellent.
Tell them what you told me about Frankie Machine as a character.
I said that Yolanda is Frankie Machine if she were a 60-year-old retired mob hitman.
And I said, yes, that is accurate.
It's just the way he sees the world, the way he gets up and makes breakfast, the way he folds his clothes, the way he prepares things for the next day, the way he just doesn't understand why certain people talk the way they do, and why are you behaving like this?
That book was hugely influential on me of reading it as a teenager.
That is very funny.
Yeah, that really, really impacted how I live my life.
Wow. Okay.
In the sense of how he has breakfast, not how he murders people.
Okay.
Just to clarify.
This book in the hands of like a Martin Scorsese, obvious answer, would have been one of the all-time classics of cinema. of mob movies. And you told me that pre The Irishman, De Niro and Scorsese were going to adapt this book for older De Niro to play Frankie Machine. But, I don't know, it fell through. They discovered the Irishman, or the book that's based on, which is called I Hear You Paint Houses. So they decided to do that one, and they didn't do Frankie Machine, which is a crying shame, because Scorsese and De Niro doing this story would have been an all-timer.
Yeah.
But you can read it, and it reads like that. It's a very cinematic book as well. A lot of dialogue, very short, punchy chapters, and it's written in the rhythm and that style of a Scorsese movie. With a great central character. So that's The Winter of Frankie Machine.
Well, next up, since I had such a great time with Crown of Midnight, I figured, why not just follow this mood and keep going and read Heir of Fire? So the next thing I read was Heir of Fire by Sarah J. Maas, which is the third novel in the Throne of Glass series. And this is where it gets really, really good. Hooked on the series. It does open up the world. We go to other locations. I think, so to back up, actually, before I start talking in circles.
Would I like these books?
Yeah.
Nice.
I think you would. To back up, if you don't know, this is her YA series, and it was the first thing that she published.
Ben and Amanda are going to be really happy.
Yes, they will. I think from somewhere in the middle of the series, she started writing ACOTAR, and that then started coming out at the same time as the last couple of books in this series. And ACOTAR is adult. This is YA. I would say that the prequel novellas and the first two books are YA. And then afterwards, they're not inappropriate for teenagers, so they're okay to be in the YA section. But I don't see a difference between this series and something like Mistborn. They have the same target audience. So this is just epic fantasy, and this is the book that really cements that, because we leave the kind of smaller, tighter location. The world opens up a lot. We get new characters, new lore, new magic, backstory. The stakes become higher. We learn a lot more about the characters. We have more POVs. This is really, like, I was reading and I was like, this is just epic fantasy, and it's better than 90% of what Orbit have ever published. It's
Cool.
really good. And my favorite character so far gets introduced here, and I loved everything about her and the supporting cast around her and the magic that she comes up. So I won't say what it is because I don't want to spoil it, but there's basically some fantasy thing that Sarah J. Maas uses in this series. And the thing itself, say stuff like, oh, elves and dwarves, and the thing itself is not something that she's made up, it exists. But the way she does it is so fresh and different from anything else that I've read, and very dark. And it's by far my favorite part of the book. It's really good. And I was surprised. It's going to sound bad. It's not like I was surprised that it was as good as it was. It's more like I was surprised that it was so creative. I wasn't expecting these books to give me something fresh and unexpected, and necessarily I was more just expecting them to be really fun to read. And they are. This is what cemented, yeah, we're doing this. We like this series. We want to keep going.
I've one more book for July. I'm in the middle of another couple of reads as well, but this is the last one that I finished now most recently, just a few days ago, on explicit recommendation from our friend Danny. Hi, Danny. And this is Walter Mosley, The Man in My Basement, with a very unsettling, strange cover. This is not a crime book. Walter Mosley is very well known for writing crime noir, more modern noir. He wrote the Easy Rawlins series, which the most famous one is the first one, The Devil in a Blue Dress. or Devil in a Blue Dress, because it was also made into a movie with Denzel Washington. But this book is firmly in the sort of general fiction non-category, literary fiction, whatever the fuck you want to call it. I don't care. It's a book.
It's a book.
Books. This is a very philosophical book, and it is in the vein of those sort of stories where you pit two characters together that challenge each other intellectually, spiritually, ecumenically, grammatically. We just watched Pirates of the Caribbean last night. This is a very strange and surreal sort of offbeat novel about a rich white man that goes to the home of a kind of waster loser dude, a black man who has inherited a sort of a big grand home in Hampton, in like, I think it's upstate New York. And this white man, mysterious guy, business guy, offers him a load of cash to rent his basement and makes a very odd proposition for how he's going to use that basement. And I really don't want to say anything else about it, because most of the enjoyment, and I read this book in a day, most of the enjoyment came from not knowing where the fuck this was going. What is happening here? Who is this guy? What does he want to do in the basement? Why is he doing this? And also, the main character in this book also has all of these questions. But, you know, who's going to say no to 50 grand? What then happens is two men with a certain worldview that have some similarities but also a lot of differences begin to, I guess, challenge each other. There are certainly, like, obviously racial undertones. It's a very specific choice that Walter Mosley chose to write a white man, a sort of a position of power white man, but then also a black man, but not a poor black man. He chose a wealthy black man as this kind of intriguing character who kind of doesn't necessarily... He comes from a place of privilege as well, but he doesn't know how to sort of value his position, and he's coming into financial trouble because he's on the verge of losing this house that he's inherited because he just can't get his ass in gear and get a job, basically. But he kind of has opinions of himself. He has an ego, but he has a different ego to the man in the basement, and they learn from each other. It's a very, very interesting book, and there's really riveting dialogue. And it is about power dynamics and power structures and privilege, definitely. But also like inheritance and legacy, and where do people come from, and who exploits legacy, and who exploits the things that people have or that they hold dear. But it's also about masculinity. Wow, this book covered a lot in like 200 pages. This is a really, really good book.
You said to me it's a hot boy book.
It's a hot boy book, a little bit. Yeah, so the main character, obviously, he's a bit of a waster. He doesn't have a job. He just drinks a lot, plays poker with his mates. But he's not really nice to his friends either. He's not really a good guy. You know, he chases women, and the confidence of this man that he meets gives him confidence, and he begins to treat women a little differently. But he's very also self-aware of that, of like feeling this confidence. And he doesn't then go off and treat these women badly. He just, I think, learns what he might want to be in a relationship and what he wants from a relationship. And the relationships that he has with 3 women in this book are all very different from each other. And they're very interesting. From a sort of, this idea of masculinity that he's exploring. But he's a very self-aware main character, and he's very interesting. And he's not a character that makes you roll your eyes in these relationships. He does, things maybe I wouldn't do. But yeah, it's an interesting book. I don't know what else to say. I don't want to give too much away about the plot or about what they talk about or what happens. But it's very, very interesting. Our friend Danny said she, by the end of it, wanted it to be like another 100 pages longer. And I kind of agree. But he does pack a lot in a lot of thought-provoking ideas in to a very short page count. It's 240 pages. It's kind of got a lot to say about privilege, masculinity, but also class and like upper class New York, and how these people just sort of go through life, kind of sort of cruising through life a little bit and examining that. And it's interesting that Walter Mosley does that through the eyes of a black man, who typically in books like these, you get the story of the sort of working class black man. Or Percival Everett writes about this a lot. His characters are quite often just ordinary middle class black voices in America, and this is quite upper class, but he's on the verge of losing it. And that is an interesting crux in the book. So yeah, this is a really good book. Shit. This is a good book. Anyway, Walter Mosley, The Man in My Basement.
After I read Crown of Midnight and had a really good time, and read Air of Fire and decided that this is a series that I might really, really love, I went and I read Queen of Shadows. And this book made me cry on a plane, which was kind of embarrassing. I had to stop myself from sobbing. And what makes it really impressive is that it wasn't like a killed a cat kind of thing, or like a, big death that made me cry. It was actually several moments through the book that made me emotional, but one specifically, quite a quiet moment where we're just kind of reflecting about things that happened 3 books ago and giving certain things a bit of closure. And that really, really got to me. I thought it was done in a very lovely way. And this book is amazing. And I think it's a top 10 contender for me. It's my favorite so far. They just keep getting better. And I don't really know how to talk for too long without any kind of spoilers about the 4th book in the series. Kind of the 5th one, because I started with the prequel novellas. And at this point, no matter when you read them, you would have read them already. So it's kind of the 5th book. Kind of continuing from Air of Fire, the scope broadens. We're starting to have payoff moments because we're 5 books in. We're having callback moments, but we're also still getting new things and new lore and new characters. And she weaves those 2 things together really well. And I think those emotional moments, like I said, often just kind of quiet moments of 2 people that have a lot of history having a certain conversation, like stuff like that was getting to me. So it wasn't like big epic moments necessarily, but having those little moments of payoff made me realize that I had gotten attached to the characters more than I thought and realized that I had. But seeing them go through certain moments and like get to certain places in like their journey and how that really affected me was an eye-opening moment of like, oh, this series has really sucked me in, and not just in a superficial, I'm having fun kind of way. To be honest, I don't think you can have superficial fun for 5 books. At some point you need to go deeper, otherwise you'll lose interest. At least that would be that for me. So this series truly has its claws in me, and this book was fucking great, honestly. This is for me. Loving this. Can't get enough of it. So yeah, Queen of Shadows, definitely my book of the months.
The Force.
Cool.
Currently, we are reading, I'm not going to talk about them now, we're going to grab it because it's right over there. Currently, I'm halfway through Demon Copperhead by Barbara Kingsolver, because I want to also continue my venture into the great American novels, and this is a contemporary one, very much fitting that mold. This is excellent so far. Barbara can write, my god. What a surprise, you're halfway through
Empire of Storms by Sarah J. Maas. I think when I was halfway through Air of Fire, I decided that I was going to be binging the series. Yeah, I'm halfway through Empire of Storms. Honestly, the titles of the series make no sense. They are like kind of irrelevant. I keep calling this Kingdom of Ash, but I know that's the last one. Still have no idea why this would be Empire of Storms. Doesn't really matter. But yeah, I'm reading book 5/6, depending of where you start counting. Novel number 5.
I'm also 100 pages into a recent enough Spanish bestseller thriller called El Mentiroso, which is The Liar. It's by Miquel Santiago. There's a trend now in Spanish publishing of sort of noir, crime noir, or thrillers set in the Basque country, in El País Vasco, which is a very good setting. If you know anything about Spain, El País Vasco, with the rain and the kind of different culture, it's a sort of pocket culture, a little bit like my own part of Spain in Galicia. Good setting for, you know, thrillers and crime books and stuff. So I'm 100 pages into that. It's mediocre.
That's upsetting.
But again, for the next wrap up. So that's what we're reading at the moment. Anyway, how do we do these things? Again, I forget.
I think generally we tell people to like the video if they liked it, and
That's right.
subscribe if they're not subscribed already and they liked what they saw, and
Help us revive the channel
yes, please.
by liking it and telling people that we're all right.
Yeah, we're alive and well and excited and reading, and do let us know in the comments what you have been reading lately. It doesn't have to be the full last 2 months. If you want to tell us, please do. We're always curious. But yeah, anything good that you've been reading lately, anything that we've read that you've also read or are interested in, let us know. As always, we'll chat to you in the comments. Thank you for watching, even after a month of nothing.
Let's go. We're done.
Bye.